Good evening, welcome to the council chambers on Tuesday, May 28th for the council meeting. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, identify possible conflicts of interest. Seeing none, we are going to be removing item N from the agenda, item N. Item D, public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. First up is Todd Jensen. And Todd, you get 5 minutes when you say your name and address. Oops, there's a little button. Thank you.
My name is Todd Jensen, 610 East 10th Street, Marshfield. My concern is manager of Krabby's Lounge, and I understand that they're starting to do some 90-minute parking checks over there. My issue with that is I guess, first of all, I don't know when we've actually looked and reviewed the 90-minute parking rule in Marshfield, but I've done some time up and down the streets during the day-wise. There's not a whole lot of people parked on the streets in Marshfield. Especially by my business, there really isn't any parking for employees. So yes, they can go over park behind the theater, to 3-hour parking there, or you can pay a $15 a month pass. Or you can drive 2 blocks and park up by Associated Bank. My problem with that is when I have mostly females that work till 10 o'clock and they're walking out of there, and some of them are 19, 20 years old, and they're walking out of there with $120, $150 in their pocket. I am by no means going to have them walk 2 blocks to park for free, so they're not paying $15 a month to park. We literally have, I think for employees, we have 2 parking spots behind the building. I did speak with the person who was checking for parking spots, and I kind of had him look at things, and I said, common sense wise right now, when you look up and down the street, there's not a single car parked on the street. But yet you're going to look at my 1 car that's parked there that's not affecting any business on that street and target me because I'm parked there. And I'm only parked there because I'm running the business. So yes, I am there some days from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. I don't feel I should have to go park for my business that I'm running a block or 2 blocks away so it's free. I think we need to consider doing something a little different, or maybe getting a yearly pass that's reasonable and kind of work on this problem, because like I said, I've went up and down Central. I've gone up and down the streets that I have the 90-minute parking. There's no cars parked on the street during the day. And I would urge all of you guys, all the members, that take some time during the day, drive up and down the streets where there's 90-minute parking and see how many cars are truly parked on the streets. There aren't. So I think we really have to look at that 90-minute parking and do something different with that, especially to help the businesses out that are in that area. I've also spoke to some other businesses there that do beauty salons. Some people are there for 3 hours to get something done. So, and their thing is they have to stop what they're doing in an hour and a half, have them go out and move their vehicle, literally 1 spot up to make it legal, and have them come back and finish what they're doing. That's not really being friendly to the businesses that are there trying to make money and pay taxes for the city. So I really hope we can look at that and find a different way or different thing that's going to work for that versus just having that 90-minute parking. And the last thing with that is I've also been informed that they only do that for 3 months out of the year. Well, if we're only going to enforce this for 3 months out of the year, why is it there for the whole year? We're not going to enforce it. So hopefully we can find a resolution to this and make things a little bit better. So, thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Second, Chris Howard.
Thank you. Here, my wife and I wrote something to read during citizens' comments today, and I drew the short straw, so I get to read it. Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about something we've all been discussing for a long time. Some might say too long. I'm talking, of course, about economic development. We've spent a lot of time. We've talked a lot about where kids can change their clothes and where families can use the bathroom, but we haven't talked enough about how the decision for where to locate the plaza bathrooms can affect economic development. Here are some examples. As some of you know, mom and pop shop Hub City Ice Cream opened a second location today across 2nd Street from the plaza. Now people eating their lunch under the pergola can see a fantastic place to buy their dessert. Please don't hide this mom and pop small business behind a city bathroom. As some of you know, Jody from High Street Salon owned her building for many years, and for the past few years, she's been trying to sell the building. I'm happy to tell you that she has now sold the building and moved her salon next door to Hub City Ice Cream. She's been through a lot as a small business owner, including a fire, among other challenges, and yet positive energy continues to flow from her. She's ready to spend the last decade or two of her career on West 2nd Street. Please don't hide her small business behind a city bathroom. In a year or two, Aaron and I will renovate the western end of the Hotel Charles building. We hope the incredible view of the plaza will help us attract an amazing tenant. Please don't build a city bathroom that blocks their view of the plaza. I know you guys have big plans for the 2nd Street corridor to create an amazing neighborhood of housing for families and young professionals, with a walkable street that joins this new housing to both Steve Miller Park and the small businesses along Central Avenue. The entrance to this neighborhood is lined with small local businesses, including Dave's Guitar Shop, Victory Apparel, what goes around comes around, Nelson's Shoes, Hub City Ice Cream, High Street, and a new restaurant with live music, rooftop dining, and dinner theater that Aaron and I hope to develop someday. Cafe tables, European music, lights strung between the buildings, awnings, window boxes filled with flowers. We have big plans. The plaza can be a part of this neighborhood. Please don't build city bathrooms that separate the plaza from this new development. You can see how locating the plaza bathrooms in the wrong location can harm economic development. Just the same, locating the bathrooms in the right location can help spur economic development. Katie Stieber is in the process of purchasing Blodgett House and creating a nonprofit small business that will give parents a place to work and kids a place to play and hang out. She's got big plans too. She has bathrooms that she's willing to rent to the city. They're already built. They already have plumbing and electrical. If the city makes some renovations to them, it won't cost $250,000. Also, she has storage space and green room space she can rent to the plaza. We know Blodgett House can serve all of these purposes because it has in the past. The public has been using our bathrooms unofficially for years. The plaza has been unofficially using storage space at Blodgett House. And last summer, Park and Rec rented some space from us for bands to use as a green room. Most of the council voted last week to build bathrooms because there was no new information since last year. However, I think we all know that there is new information to consider. When we suggested the idea of using Blodgett House for bathrooms a year ago, it wasn't a great fit because we imagined city bathrooms shared with maybe a law office or an accounting firm. However, when families use the city bathrooms in Blodgett House, they'll notice Katie's business, and because the bathrooms will actually help her business, she'll be able to offer a lower monthly rent than we could offer a year ago. That new information is a game changer. That's the new information you didn't know 2 weeks ago. And that's the new information that makes renting bathrooms in Blodgett House a better choice than building bathrooms. There is a deal to be made here because it benefits the community, the city, the plaza, families, and also Katie's business. While the city is going to save money renting bathrooms rather than building them, the relationship with the city will help Katie's business stay strong so she can continue attracting families to the downtown for decades to come. All we're asking for today is that the council take the time needed to give both options fair and open-minded consideration. Don't just ask your constituents if they prefer building bathrooms or continuing to use porta potties. Let them know about the third option before asking their opinion. Please talk with Katie. She wasn't quite ready to make a proposal today regarding the bathrooms, but she's ready to sit down with you, do some brainstorming, and start creating a win-win deal. Don't make a $250,000 decision without fully exploring the options and learning all the facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Any other public comments? Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item E, approval of minutes, May 14th, 2024, regular meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber,
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly,
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Staff updates.
I just have one. As you may recall, not too long ago, we gave approval at this body, and the Fire and Police Commission did as well, for a therapy dog. And we're pleased to have that dog with us here today. So we're going to get an introduction to Roger.
Reggie. Reggie had a potty. Yep, here he comes.
I'm sorry, I said Roger. It's Reggie. I apologize. I can't even read my own writing.
Yay, Reggie. Look at, oh, honey. How sweet.
Would you guys mind if Tony walked around with me?
We would love
I
that.
figured that'd be okay.
We were just asking, yeah.
It's with great pleasure that I introduce Reggie and our SRO, Tony, who now takes a back seat to all of the presentations. And we started this program, kind of a thought of it actually about a year, maybe almost 2 years ago. And Tony did a lot of work to find some logistics to make it happen. We have, the dog was donated. And he's done a lot of the research to help us with the logistics as far as insurance and getting the school on board. And they've been phenomenal to work with and are excited about the program. Reggie helps us to build rapport with kids just in general to help them feel that we're, as police officers, a little more approachable, which has helped quite a bit. But really where we found a lot of benefit with Reggie is his ability to knock down walls with kids who are struggling, especially with mental illness and different anxiety type things. And Tony's got a bunch of success stories already, and we're looking forward to having a whole bunch more. So anyway, this is Reggie. We probably don't have time to walk him around everybody, but stop on in and we'll be happy to introduce you. So.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you very much. And whoever donated the dog, thank them also. Absolutely. And Tony, thank you. Okay, great. Oh, here he goes.
My notes. Blueberry Cottages who donated the dog. And I have to say that we actually had a couple of different kennels offer dogs. We could only do one at a time, but we were able to help Wood County get theirs. And I would urge anybody that's got an organization that deals with kids or public to look into it. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, goodness. Item G, my comments. This evening, I'm going to read a proclamation for the Columbus Dons boys basketball team and Coach Joe. City of Marshfield, Wisconsin proclamation honoring the Marshfield Columbus Catholic High School boys basketball state championship team and Coach Joe. I'm going to say Joe because I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name. And you know what? This is how I roll. And please don't tell me how to pronounce it because I'll never remember, okay? Somebody get Denise a chair also because I know she's been standing. Whereas the City of Marshfield honors and recognizes Marshfield Columbus Catholic High School Boys Basketball Dons WIAA Division 5 State Championship comprising of 18 members, teams coaches, and 19th year coach Joe's 401st win. Whoa, everybody, what do you think of that? I think it's pretty great, yes? Whereas all the hard work, determination, passion, and commitment to the sport by the team, coaches, school administration, and parents, including the team members, meeting the required grades and attendance. Congratulations, gentlemen. This is a huge thing for you. Congratulations. Can't wait to see what happens next with you guys. Whereas on March 16th, 2024, the Dons competed in the WIAA Division 5 State Championship at the Kohl Center in Madison versus Abundant Life Christian, winning 81-75. And whereas the Dons set a WIAA state boys basketball tournament record for 13 three-pointers in the semifinale, and guess what? 14 in the championship game. Oh man, isn't that great? Congratulations, gentlemen. Whereas it is with the great pride that we recognize both their achievements and the impact on their school and our great community. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Lois T. Strick, Mayor of the City of Marshfield, do hereby ask the Common Council and citizens of Marshfield to join me in celebrating and honoring both Columbus Catholic boys basketball team and Coach Joe for his 401st win. Congratulations again, gentlemen. If you'd like to come up for a picture, and everybody, yes.
All right. That's fine. Got half back. All right with that. All right, looking here. 1, 2, 3. Smiles, and then we'll get. I can see my guy back too.
Am I too tall? Yeah, right.
Stand. Yep, there it is. Oh, I can see that. 1, 3, and then get.
One more thing I need to say before you gentlemen leave. Yesterday I was in the parade for Memorial Day, and as the trailer went by with the VFW and the auxiliary and the Legion people on, the band members saluted. How much greater can we have? Congratulations, gentlemen, and good luck on your baseball. I like this. Hopefully we see you again. Yes, you can.
On behalf of our school, we just wanted. On behalf of our team and our school, we just wanted to thank the Common Council, the city government, and really the whole community for all the support. Marshfield Police Department and Fire Department always give us an escort out of town to the state tournament whenever we make it. And the whole community just stepped up and really came out of the woodwork. Everybody did to support us with maybe a meal or a donation for travel expenses. And we always tell our boys that they have to represent their faith, their family, their school, and their community to the highest level. And I think for the first time in 19 years, we represented the community the right way, because I think this community is the best. And a lot of it is because of what you people do. So please know that we appreciate it. We're very, very grateful, and we are proud to represent the city of Marshfield.
That's pretty cool. Look at this, and they're putting their chairs away, you guys, also. This, I'm sorry, one more time, all right? Yeah, thank you, thank you. Thank you, let's do it. Great. Item H, council comments. Seeing none. City administrators update.
A couple things. First of all, the special meeting we have coming up on Tuesday, June 11th. It'll be before our next council meeting at 5 o'clock. We'll be talking about the 2025 budget process and really digging in, getting a foundation laid for the challenge ahead. And then we'll take a short break, and then the regular meeting will be at 6:30 that evening. I'm going to ask you to do something different this time. We're all going to bring our own food that evening, because it will be a long night. I know sometimes we provided it, but just ask that we all bring our own for that evening. And then the other thing I want to mention is we have a lot of people on Zoom from time to time, and that's great that they can participate remotely. But just a reminder that if you are on Zoom for one of our meetings, please try and connect at least 5 minutes before the meeting, if not a little bit more. That'll help us resolve some of the issues that we've had with last-minute audio and visual concerns. So if you could please connect 5 minutes or more before the meeting, that would be helpful. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Administrator Bard. J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Ken Bargender. I serve on the City of Marshfield Historic Preservation Commission. And May is History Month. We all know that, right? And I just want to recap some of the activities that the commission members were involved with, some for city, some for Northwood County Historical Society. So one of the things that the city, our commission sponsors is the Middle School Art Awards. Okay, so we just had the award presentations, and there was 10 different students received awards, and the kids are just tickled pink. And another activity we had through the Upper Mansion was that we did the third grade elementary school guided tours through there, and I was part of that. And another activity for the third graders is the historic cemetery tours. Unfortunately, last Friday we had inclement weather, but what we did is instead of the kids coming to us, we went to the kids. So we went over to Grant School, and we went over to Lincoln School, and we had a great day. So we really appreciate the support the city gives historic preservation here in the city of Marshfield. I'll look forward to seeing all of you at the Pie and Ice Cream Social and the Alpa Mansion on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bill Penker representing the Police and Fire Commission. On behalf of the Police Department and the Police and Fire Commission, I want to thank all the local officials as well as the concerned and supportive residents who perhaps we did not thank in person for attending the Police Memorial Ceremony on May 16. I had the privilege of being one of the speakers, and as I noted, when most people think of line of duty deaths, they think of gunfire. And in 2023, line of duty deaths actually fell into 17 separate categories. And they range from gunfire to drowning. And all of these were in the effort to protect and to serve. As a New Jersey officer noted at the National Memorial Ceremony, you never know what's behind the next door. And that door can be anywhere. And to give you an example, in the past month, Chicago police officer Luis Huesca had finished his shift. He was driving home. He was carjacked and shot multiple times. Nobody knew that that door was there. When you look at line of duty deaths, there is one that is, shall we say, new to the list, but yet never cataloged. And it's the slow death of law enforcement agencies due to retirements, failure to retain officers, failure to recruit officers. And to quote from two representatives from the Houston, Texas Police Union, this is from Douglas Griffin, who's president of the union. It is not safe in major cities in 2024, and it's not safe here. We're in a perfect storm right now. We had the George Floyd effect come down. We can't hire. We can't retain. The people are leaving left and right. Ray Hunt, who's the executive director of the Houston Union, noted, and it's a direct quote, "Who the heck wants to be a police officer in 2024? When society starts to suffer from absolute relativism on the part of the public, when they disrespect the police, when government disrespects the police, when they want to defund, when they think rules apply to them only when they want to, law enforcement suffers, the community suffers. Luckily, in our situation, we have people that want to come here We found that out recently. We had 2 people that came out to our department. They came here and turned away other offers of employment because they wanted to work here. So that's nice to know. Somewhat related to the line of duty deaths is the fact that attacks upon law enforcement officers are increasing. But at the same time, we're finding citizen intervention is also increasing. I have the opportunity to see a number of body cams and squad car cam footage, and to see 3 and 4 citizens stop their cars, jump out, and enter the fray and help subdue a subject is really gratifying to see. I will point out, however, that it is not gratifying for the suspect. The general rule, shall we say, is if the public intervenes, it would have been much better off if the subject had followed directions. They tend to wind up on the way bad end of things. When you see in a squad car footage, a citizen rushes in, pushes the officer aside, grabs somebody and body slams them, and then the officer has to pull the citizen off. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but the police certainly were receiving their help. I'm going to distribute right now a double-sided page. I was asked if I would read this at the memorial ceremony, and I said no. Will you read this? And the police officer said, no, I can't do that publicly. If you want to, read this after the meeting, right? That was written by the 12-year-old son of one of the members of the U.S. Marshals fugitive team that was ambushed in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ken. Any other commissions, boards, or committees? Seeing none, move on to item K, consent agenda. We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Giles. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber has his hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on Marshfield Utilities Commission meeting May 13th. And I don't know if we can get an answer to my question without pulling that, or if we should pull it. So I'll leave it up to the discretion of the chair.
We'll pull it, yes.
Thank you. I'll move to pull it then.
Yes. Motion to refer for the remainder. Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion carries, and we will come back to the utilities question.
Okay, thank you. During public comment, there was a question by Mr. Cruz, framed as a second complaint specifically to underground electrical lines. And I didn't see anything further mentioned in the meeting minutes, and I wonder if we could get a little bit more background on what that situation is and what action is being taken for the resident.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Nick. Yes, sir.
Sure. So address that comment. So when we make upgrades to our system, be it if we're converting an area from overhead to underground, like in a backyard lot line, or if we have overhead facilities and we're replacing with new poles, many times those poles contain other utilities on them. And for instance, Frontier, Charter Communications, and other telco companies. And we have contracts with them for them to be attached to the poles. And when we go through an underground area, like in this particular customer situation, we provide notice to the other contractor or other utilities to go underground. And there's a period that they have in order to make restitution. And then after that, we follow contract terms to move the needle, if you will, to a point of resolution. Unfortunately, with some of these utilities, it's difficult to deal with them and it takes time. we have, thankfully, since those comments, we've been able to, we've been attacking from both ends. I've been doing it from a legal perspective, and our team has been trying to attack it from a more of a local perspective. And we have been able to get the wires removed. And I think if the pole has not been moved already, it will be shortly from the backyard of where the complaint or the comment came from.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have a motion by Alderman Weigel, a second by Alderman Tompkins. Any other discussion on pulling this item?
We should clarify Mr. Reigel's motion, please.
I move to approve.
And you're okay to second, Alderman Tompkins?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber,
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly,
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. And that was item L, that action to remove from the consent agenda. Item N, presentation value of the utility, presented by Nick Cum, General Manager of Marshfield Utilities and members of the Marshfield Utilities Commission.
All right. Well, hopefully this is working. As Steve mentioned earlier, technical difficulties. So good evening, everyone. This is the annual presentation that we provide on the value of the utility. As we met, the presentations evolved over the years, and due to technical difficulties last year, this year it's just going to be a straight presentation with me speaking. Before I dive into the content, I just want to take a moment to recognize the members of the Utility Commission. Secretary Harry Borgman, who's here tonight, President Mike April, Paul Kapla. Nate Miller was not able to join us this evening. Nick Facial is here. And then Mike O'Reilly and obviously Natasha Tompkins. Their dedication and guidance are instrumental in our mission to serve the community. So tonight we're going to go through those 5 general areas. And so I'll figure out how to advance this slide and we'll be set. There we go. So first we'll talk about together we can get it done, get into the different city departments, how we collaborate, education outreach, and some of the state organizations. Utility collaborates with city staff on a number of different areas, including coordination of replacement of our water main and services with road projects. We also have our staff participates in the design review team process, which involves new developments that are coming to the community. We provide support and resources, like being a part of the interview teams for city staff, for new city staff. We also provide financial support for the Thomas Park, and we support the police department has multiple radio antennas on utility facilities as well. Our extensive fiber optic cable ensures a secure and dedicated connection between city facilities, enhancing communication and data transfer reliability. We jointly invest in the annual GIS, or the mapping subscription, and also the aerial photo updates for mapping purposes that happen about every 5 years. Additionally, we contribute to the funding of one of the electrical inspector positions. Lastly, our dedicated utility team handles all of the aspects of wastewater billing to properties, ensuring efficient and seamless operations. Education outreach. At MU, we prioritize cultivating robust relationships and resources to nurture the future workforce. Over the past year, we have actively engaged in various events targeting students across the different education levels, ranging from pre-K all the way up to high school and beyond. By participating in these initiatives, we not only invest in the development of our future workforce, but also establish connections with potential future customers. It's a strategic approach that benefits both the community and the utility in the long run. On every electric bill, you'll notice a state-mandated public benefits charge. Roughly annually, for every customer, we have to collect $15. And these dollars directly support Focus on Energy and energy assistance programs. In 2023 alone, each of these programs received about $107,000 from our customer base. What's noteworthy, and you can see it on the slide, is that both Focus on Energy and Energy Assistance Program allocated funds back to our customers at a greater level, and sometimes more than 2 times what we originally provided to them. And additionally, we secured grant funding for replacement of approximately 250 lead water services, the private side, and surpassing the remarkable milestone of $1 million. And also, as you know, in your approval a few weeks ago, we're proud of the $1 million in principal forgiveness we received from the Department of Department of Natural Resources for the PFAS treatment facility, underscoring our commitment to environmental stewardship and public health. You can count on us. So let's talk a little bit about reliability and some customer service statistics. In calendar year 2023, we encountered a total of 181 outages, with over 60% of those interruptions actually occurring due to birds, squirrels, trees, and lightning. So if we can get a proclamation against any of those, that would be...
We'll work on that.
Yes, please. Our strategic capital improvement plan is designed to address these challenges head on. We focus on replacing of aging infrastructure and equipment. We're increasing our efforts to underground, especially in backyard lot lines that are difficult to access. And we're implementing rigorous tree trimming and removal protocols. And through those efforts, we've seen noticeable reduction in our outage occurrences over the years. It's important to note that there are other factors that contribute to outages, including equipment failure, incidents involving vehicles colliding with our equipment, encounters with wildlife such as raccoons, and we have unfortunately situations where we're unable to identify the actual cause. On the right, there's an essential metric we use to gauge the frequency of interruptions. It's called SAFE, or System Average Interruption Frequency. Our SAFE rating stands at an impressive 0.26. It means that only 1 in 4 of our customers during 2023 experienced an outage. You can see that this number is considerably lower than the others. With the state average, more than half the customers generally in the state have experienced an outage during the year. And this underscores our relentless commitment to delivering reliable service to our valued customers. So a little bit about water reliability. Annually, we produce and provide an impressive volume of over 1.8 million gallons of water per day to meet the needs of our community. Moreover, our system encountered 35 main breaks, as noted on the slide. Encouragingly, this number is on the downward trend annually, largely attributed to our proactive approach to capital replacement and infrastructure upgrades. The commitment to ongoing improvement ensures the reliability and reliance of our water distribution system for the years to come. I should note that you can see the year is from July to June. Last July through year to date, we're right now at 21 main breaks. A lot of that can be attributed to obviously our work, but also the weather that plays a factor. We had a pretty modest winter, so the frost doesn't go as deep, and then ultimately have less main breaks as well. Customer service. In the past year, our office fielded nearly 15,000 phone calls from our valued customers seeking assistance and support. Additionally, we proactively sent out over 6,500 text messages regarding payment notices, outage alerts, and notifications regarding discolored water. Looking ahead, we're actively pursuing enhancements to our communication systems. One of our key objectives is to seamlessly integrate texting messaging with our advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI system. This integration will streamline our communication channels and provide even more efficient and timely updates to customers when there's disruption to their services. So we'll talk a little bit about locally vested dollars or interest. So we take pride in our workforce of nearly 50 full-time employees who not only contribute to our operations, but also live in and support the local community with their wages. Furthermore, we collaborated with organizations like Mackey and the school district to provide valuable youth apprenticeship opportunities. In the past, we've had 2, and we've actually are in here in the month of June are going to have 3 youth apprentices joining us to start their process, and we hope to increase that over time for at least 1 or 2 more. One of our notable achievements is maintaining a stable workforce, which is reflected in our low turnover rate. Last year, we conducted stay interviews with our employees, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Employees cited our positive culture, trust, clear defined purpose for their roles, and an overall supportive atmosphere as key factors contributing to their satisfaction and retention within the organization. You can think of stay interviews as the opposite of exit interviews. Local purchases. So in 2023, we had 3.9 million of our spending staying in the local area. And I'll define the local area as Marshfield, Pittsville, Auburndale, Stratford, Spencer. That's the general area that we're looking at here. And those spending were on items like health insurance, legal services, vehicle purchases and maintenance, office cleaning, excavation services, and numerous types of supplies and material. There's local engagement. This is just a snapshot of some of the local organizations where MU employees volunteer with. Churches and youth coaches, we didn't list each one individually, but you can imagine there's quite a few that volunteer in those types of areas. So now everyone's favorite topic, the Benjamins. So we'll talk a little bit about rates and then the pilot payment. So sorry for the eye chart, hopefully it comes across. But so here we analyze the monthly average residential electric bills across different communities. A striking trend emerges. With the exception of Wisconsin Rapids, residents here enjoy significant savings exceeding $30 per month compared to their counterparts in neighboring areas. Our customers enjoy savings of approximately $11 per month compared to Wisconsin Rapids. These savings, along with our award-winning reliability, offer considerable value to our community as a whole. Now we'll talk about water rates. I think one thing that's interesting is that the average monthly use is about 2,800 gallons per residential property. So in comparing the average monthly water bills across different communities, Marshfield typically falls within the mid-range compared to other water utilities. This positioning is influenced by several factors. For instance, water resources are limited in Marshfield due to the presence of our clay soils. Marshfield has 15 wells, including some located several miles, 4 to 5, 6 miles outside of the city limits, to meet the needs of our community. In contrast, other communities with sandy soils often have very few wells, and generally they're located within the city boundaries, which reduces costs. Another component, moreover, is that we're actively addressing challenges such as PFAS contamination, alongside initiatives to replace lead water services and mains with higher failure rates. Challenges not universally shared by all communities. So, yet even when considering both water and electric bills together, our customers enjoy lower cost. For instance, if you compared Stevens Point combined costs to those in Marshfield for water and electric, the customers in Marshfield, their bill each month is $22 less, or $22 savings compared to being in Stevens Point. So a little bit about the pilot payment. So we're going to examine both the water and electric pilot, the utility aid payment, and the dividend for Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids, and Marshfield. The scale of water pilot payment generally aligns with the size of the city. Stevens Point is about 5 square miles larger than Marshfield, and Wisconsin Rapids is approximately 1 square mile larger than Marshfield. So therefore, there's more infrastructure in those communities which relate to how the pilot payment is calculated, and therefore that's why those numbers are slightly higher as you look at Stevens Point compared to Wisconsin Rapids and here to Marshfield. The utility aid payment is a component of the Department of Revenue shared revenue program in Wisconsin. It's based on taxation of assets owned by investor-owned utilities. So in Marshfield, this involves We Energies, the gas provider. In Wisconsin Rapids, it also involves We Energies, and Alliant Energy actually has some office spaces in the city limits as well. And in Stevens Point, it's We Energies for gas, just like us, but then Wisconsin Public Service, an investor-owned utility for electricity. The electric pilot is related to a municipal utility. And you can see here, Stevens Point, they're served by an investor-owned utility, so their pilot payment is $0. At the bottom, you'll notice the value of Marshfield Utilities provides to the city compared to similar-sized communities that support the general fund. It's worth noting that if the school tax rate would not have changed last year from the previous year, MU's total payment would have been approximately $400,000 more than what's listed here. So I think if you add the $400,000, you can see there's quite a substantial difference between what we're contributing back to the general fund and what other communities are getting. So talk a little bit about some of the last couple slides here. So we'll look at what we completed, what we're working on, and what's beyond. So in 2023, some of the achievements are lead streetlight project. We're in the process of changing out the streetlights. We're about 25% complete. We are fortunate enough to be getting a number of grants to help subsidize some of those costs, and that'll help reduce the end cost that comes to the city for streetlights when it's complete in the next handful of years. Building completion. I know I've been up here a number of times talking about it, so I promise this will be the last time, I hope. So we completed that last year. I think something that I want to note to you is that our project on time, it was $17 million. There is a project right now that just got done bidding about a month ago. It's slightly smaller than ours, and theirs is $24 million. So that's what a matter of 2 years does from a project, cost from the construction and inflation and other factors. So timing is everything sometimes. Lead services were last year completed 184, done a number of hydrants. Obviously, you can see the poles and the wire and water main that was installed. Obviously, all of those things cost a considerable amount of capital. And that's obviously what your rates help us support and reinvesting back into the system. And then finally, you can see Great Lakes Utilities Administration. That's a joint action agency. It's where member utilities, electric utilities work together. It's kind of the strength of numbers, if you will. And we're self-managed or member-managed. In Marshfield, we take on that role of managing that group. Other communities that are part of that include Triplo, Cornell, Bangor, Medford, Kiel, Wisconsin Rapids, Stratford, Manitowoc. I think I missed one, Shawano and Clintonville. So you can see we're well represented across the state and helping those communities as they try to achieve their energy needs. 2024, some of the projects we have on the horizon. PFAS, we've already talked about. Filter sand replacements, so we replaced the sand up at the water treatment facility a couple weeks ago. That's something that was original to the plant when it was built back in the 90s. It was in need of replacement, a $700,000-800,000 project. Lead replacement continues. We are working on new billing statements, which should roll out here in the next week or two to our customers. We already talked about the youth apprenticeship. Community care project. That's something that we are working on. It's our 120th anniversary as being a municipal utility, and it's something we're trying to give back to give back. Working on some conversions, working on a water rate case that we hope to have submitted later in a couple months. I will note that it's been 8 years since the last full rate case, so we've been doing a good job of trying to manage rates during that time. And you can see some of the other real-time outage map is another thing from a customer's perspective that we're working on, trying to get that out as we have outages that customers can go to and look at and see what the status or what the where outages are within our system. And finally, future planning. So we are working on some long-term planning studies of our electric distribution system. There's a lot of movements of electric vehicles, electrification. The data centers that are popping up everywhere to help support the artificial intelligence movement. So those are the types of things that we're trying to forecast into our long-term planning to understand how those things might impact us and what type of capital improvements we may need in the future and how to position ourselves so we're ready for it. We're also working at power supply planning. So that's from a wholesale perspective. We have, basically, we send you a bill as a customer. We get a bill from a wholesale side. We're trying to, there's a million different ways of supplying the wholesale side. And we're in a process of evaluating that because our current arrangement comes up here in about 4 years. And then finally, we are working on a strategic plan update. It's been 3 years since the last one. So that's something that we'll be attacking here over the next few months. That's the last slide. So,
any questions from the council? Alderman Spiros?
Thank you, Nick. The screen was covered on the amount of the pilot payment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Covered.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh. Yep. I actually see.
It's $2,297,929. You're welcome.
Alderman Stauber?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Very well done and well-managed operation. Couple of questions. When I see low electrical rates and low water breaks, it kind of confirms that the hard work that the utility has done over the years to manage trees and avoid electrical outages. But the question that comes to mind for me, it's a promotable fact. And I wonder, Nick, as the manager of the utility, are you part of the development review team, DRT? when developers come to Marshfield, they'll sit down at the table with a group of functional areas and get all their questions answered at one time?
Yeah, we have representatives from both our water and electric teams that attend those meetings regularly.
Okay, thank you. And when we talk about comparable rates, water and electric to other communities, do those include fees like fire hydrant fees or anything else that is not, net water or net electric rates?
Those would be just the standard electric and water. It doesn't get into the fire protection, nor does it get into, garbage service or any other bills, wastewater, things like that. Just want to compare just the services strictly that we're providing.
Okay, and then the last question I have, and maybe this is for the mayor or the council, but I've always had a lot of value in having a good cross-reference of users on the utility commission. Specifically, industrial users who I think are probably your largest customers. And I wonder at this time, are there any representatives on the commission who are actively employed in industry in Marshfield or in the area, serving as commissioners?
Well, I believe Mr. O'Reilly obviously owns his own business, so he's actively employed, I would think. And then I believe Mike Ebro is actively employed as well. Nate Mueller, I believe, has, I don't know his official status, but I do believe he's active, I think, in different regards. But your point is well taken. I do believe that is something that I think this body has talked about over time as far as the representation, as far as having cross-representation, both from an industry perspective, but also potentially a background perspective. It's good to have people that are financially minded. So that's obviously an area that we have a good group, and obviously something that could be thought about as we look to the future and there's vacancies on the commission.
Okay, thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Nick? Thank you, Nick, to you and your dynamic team. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Glad you could do it this year. And we've stricken item N, so we're going to item O, presentation, final report on compensation market update, introduced by Sarah Dreschel, Human Resources Director, presented by Elena Moss McGrath, Human Resources Group.
Thank you. Just going to take a moment to welcome Elena from the McGrath Human Resources Group, who will be presenting the final report on the compensation study that we began last year. So I will turn it over to Elena.
For the presentation. There we go. Excellent. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me back. This is, I think, the fourth time that I am speaking with the group regarding the compensation, the market update. And as you are aware, we started this process back in 2023, and we are wrapping it up, and everything has been turned over to your administration. I do have a presentation. I will tell you that you have seen most all of the slides. You have been provided all of this information over the course of the several months and the multiple meetings that I have given you updates. And so really what I want to focus on before I get into the recommendations is more of an overview of the evolution of what's been happening with compensation since just before 2020. And if you recall, we did your market update, or we updated your salary schedule back in 2018, right before the market absolutely took off. And so I have a slide here on human capital, and it really talks a little bit about why are public employers struggling. But I think the better or the bigger picture here is really what what that evolution is, because we are at a point here where if you were to ask any public sector manager, any human resources professional, anybody who owns their own business at this point, you would say, or you would be able to confirm that we are in absolutely unprecedented times as it pertains to recruitment and retention. And when we think about what's happened, I think a lot of individuals think about it was COVID that really started this, but actually in our field, in our industry, we could tell that things were starting to happen at the public level probably around 2019, right before COVID. And COVID absolutely accelerated the turnovers that was having in the private and the public sector, and a lot of individuals were almost ready to leave, or they were, getting ready to leave, and they decided, I'm out. And, for whatever reason, right or wrong, whether it was how the employers were trying to handle COVID, or that they just simply said, time's short, life's short, and it's time to go. And then after that, if you fast forward and think about, in the last couple of years, remember when we were talking about $15 an hour minimum wage across the country? That has happened since COVID, and it feels like a real long time ago at this point when you're thinking about wages. But it was shortly after COVID where we were starting to see that the private sector was ramping up. There were a lot of dollars that were being flushed into the economy. They were doing a lot of hiring. They were elevating their wages. And what happened was that public sector, don't want to say that we got left behind, but there was a little bit of responsiveness by the public sector, because private sector took off and public sector really had to take time to catch up. And what happened then was everyone started worrying about recruitment because we're losing all of our people. We need strong competitive wages to be able to backfill those positions. And then the employers realized what's really important is not only the recruitment, but it's also the retention of the personnel that you have. And we want to hold on to those folks because they are our training, they are our staff development, they are the future of our organization. And this organization, I know firsthand that this organization has struggled with people poaching your key professional staff because they are well trained and they take that skill set and it's highly transferable into both private and public sector. And so we are at this point now where I would say about a year ago, a lot of employers, a lot of clients were wondering, is the economy, is the inflation, is it real or not? Or what are we going to be doing? Because, you've seen 8% inflationary rates, and are those wages really changing by that amount or not? And there were many of us in the profession that were really taking a step back and saying, I don't know, is it real or is it not? And a lot of employers opted to, we're not going to really quite capture what's going on with the inflation, but we're going to do better than what we normally would do, and we're going to take a wait and see approach. What we have here today, and I can tell that just from the time that we started your project to the time we are at right now, we are going to be dealing with inflation. Inflation is real, it's here to stay, and I can give you a little crystal ball, although if you were to ask your HR director, she would say this isn't necessarily a crystal ball. She's living it as all of your departments are living it at this point. But what we can see coming now in the future is employees who are stressed. They are thinking about how they're going to make their debt payments, anything that they purchase, that how are they going to help maintain their house? How are they going to take care of their children? How are they going to prepare themselves for retirement? And what is happening now in the private sector, in many organizations, is that they are looking at how are we as an employer going to help take care of our employees, because we want them to be well-rounded, we want them to be actively engaged, we want them to be present so that they are active, functional members of our departments. And so we anticipate that the stress of the inflation is going to start to be impactful to organizations. And so if wages are not adjusted, I worry for your organization. And I don't mean to say this in a frightening manner, I'm not, but I worry that your employees will start to say, it's not that I want to leave, it's that I can't afford to stay. And so, we're at the point where we have to start talking about what your true cost of labor is and what we have created for your organization, and this model that we are going to recommend to you to compensate your employees for the next several years. So very, very quickly, let's just talk about the backstory. As you know, we updated your model in 2018, and we gave you a step model and descending steps. So the further you progressed, the smaller the value was of your step. And what we found here is that because the market conditions have changed, a lot of the industries within those markets have changed. That inflation factor that I just talked about, along with the city's very modest market adjustments that you were able to provide or put on the salary schedule, has left your current salary ranges non-competitive. And so that was a large part of what is it that we should do with your structure. And as I think if you recall a couple of meetings ago, we talked about what our options were, and we did settle on a step model. As a reminder, this is your public comparables that we utilize. This is the similar list that we used in 2018. We let a couple of comparables dropped off the list. We added a couple more. And I have the opportunity to say thank you to one of your comparables, Marshfield Utilities. This is the first time I've ever been in a presentation where I have a comparable in the audience. Thank you very much for participating and providing us your salary information. So you will find that in the body of my final report, all of our market finding graphs are available. And what the takeaway on this is the trend of your current model. And this is your current model as compared to the rest of those comparable organizations. And I don't know how closely you can see that on your screen, but the blue column and the off-white column, those are positions that have competitive salaries at specific parts in your salary ranges. Anything that is in orange is too low to be market competitive at this point. And so what that tells us is that all in all, your entire model needed to be readjusted. And so as we proceeded with making those recommendations, again, as a reminder, what we did was we aligned you to the 50th percentile or the average of all of those comparators. And what that means is even with the recommended salary ranges, and they've been updated and they've been elevated very, very nicely, you're going to find that an employee is going to say, I can still go somewhere else and make more money. And they're absolutely right, because we did not poise the city of Marshfield to be the top employer. We put you in the middle where you're 50th, which means that there's going to be some employers that pay more than you and others that pay less than you. And that is where most of the public employers need to place themselves at this point, just for financial reasons. And so we have you aligned to the average, and that is a good philosophy for you for the next upcoming years. Really quickly then, and I have a little bit of overlap on a couple of these slides, so I'm going to go right to the outcomes. The last time I spoke with you and we talked about that we were going to create a step model, we identified that it was going to be a 2.5% step model and that there was going to be 11 or 12 steps. Since that time, we have scaled that back. They still continue to be 2.5% steps, but there are only 9 steps now. And what that means for the city is that your range in totality is a little bit more narrow than what we expected. And that is really what a lot of employers are needing to do at this time, because they need to make sure that they're fiscally responsible at the top end or the maximum of those salary ranges. So when you look at it, you will see step 5 is your midpoint, and that means then that you're going down 10%, up 10%. So you've got a total of a 20% spread. We find that is going to be, it is going to be adequate for the city of Marshfield. You will be able to discuss additional steps in the future, but first we need to get through your implementation and make sure that this is sustainable for you going forward. There are some, overall, we made a 10% adjustment to the salary ranges. Okay, although there are some positions that did not need as much movement and others that needed more. So we did make a couple of additional adjustments. And so just know that we might have some positions that are a little bit less than 5%, some that are a little bit less than 10%, and some that are a little bit more than 10%. But grade 121 is now the entrance to your organization. And although I'm not sure if you have a copy of the final report yet, if that has been provided to you, you will find that there are a couple of pay grades that are available should we need to use them in the future for any new positions. But grade 121 starts the organization out at a little bit greater than $20 an hour. It's $20.31 for your regular status positions. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these recommendations came from data that I collected in the third quarter of 2023. We've been working on this project with the city administration for a significant period of time. And what that means then is that prior to any type of implementation, I am going to recommend that you provide an adjustment to this. Otherwise, by implementation of these recommendations as they stand here today, you're going to be going in behind the market again. So before you implement, I do recommend that you put an economic adjustment. And if this waits until 2025, and understanding that that might have to be an option for you, that means that we're going to be trending it twice. And I highly recommend that you do that. And if you're unable to do that, excuse me, I guess I'm proceeding too much, then I also have some additional recommendations for the city so that you do not fall. We don't want you to fall behind as much as you fell behind here this time. A couple of other things, although you have seen this already, we have a couple title changes, some classification changes, especially with the administrative assistants, and this is not necessarily unusual. You are in lean times. You have a high expectation of your staff. They are not necessarily doing entry-level work, and we felt that it was best to collapse those levels because they are being asked to do more sophisticated level of work, and so we collapsed them to get them elevated up into the structure a little bit. The other consideration I just want to point out for you is that when Steve and Sarah called me a couple of years ago and we were talking about this project, they called me because of compression. And compression it's a real concern because you have union and you have command staff that are non-union, although they supervise those union personnel. The union collective bargaining is done in a much different process, and those salary ranges have historically here at the city progressed at a more accelerated level than your command staff, and that causes compression. And the result then is individuals who don't want to promote. And that's really very difficult because when you are thinking about your professional development and really your succession planning, you want people to be able to promote up. We corrected that compression issue with the 2023 ranges. I want to be cognizant of that because you now are in 2024 with your collective bargaining, and that is another compelling reason why you should be making an adjustment to these ranges before implementation. This is just a very quick snapshot of what the structure looks like. This will be the body of the report. It has, it starts at pay grade 110, goes to 140. There are 9 steps, each of them at 2.5%. Nothing else is listed, just the table itself. So with that, the last part of this, before we talk about implementation, is how you manage this going forward. And this is really important because we've put a lot of time and energy into updating your model. Now, how do you manage it? And we've got some recommendations, and the first one is for you to identify an economic indicator that you're going to rely on an annual basis. And there's a couple of different options that you have, and my ask is that you use the same economic indicator, you use it the same time each year, so that you're not picking and choosing, because economic indicators will vary depending upon what their source is. But there are some there's some very good ones in Wisconsin, and you can simply even make contact with your current comparators and find out how they're adjusting their salary schedules. We want for the salary schedule to be adjusted. That is how you're going to keep your ranges aligned to the market. The steps there within where the employees are going to be progressing, that is the mechanism that allows the employees to progress through that salary range. And I am recommending, and with just about every employer at this point, every client, we used to say every 3 to 5 years, and with the current market that we are in, every 3 years you should be going out and just doing a check to make sure that you're not too far off of the market. I think that this is going to be particularly important for Marshfield because you were a little bit far off, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen for you again. So if the city is not able to put a meaningful salary schedule adjustment on your ranges, then we're going to want to make sure that you're looking at this every 3 years so that you're right sizing or making that correction every 3 years. Metrics will help your HR department know if we can push that off a year. I don't want to do it just to do it, but certainly the metrics, your turnover and whatnot is going to tell you when it's time. Last but not least here is the implementation. And, I think that everyone in this room is very understanding of the fiscal constraints that the city is in at this point. And I have been speaking with your city administration team on opportunities and options. I will say that you will have a couple of options, probably even within that, more than a couple of options. And your city administration is planning on presenting these options to you at a future meeting. I think that's going to be coming in the very, very near future. Please know that even though the project is done from McGrath's point of view, I am available, and I've spoken with your administration. I'm available as a resource. We can troubleshoot. I can talk with them about options that we have in the event that we need to do some sort of a phased approach. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from the council? Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for all the work you've done for a long time, kind of investigating and digging into who we are and how we're paying people. I just had one tiny little question. You said choose an economic indicator, and I'm wondering who chooses that? Who normally in the city?
That's a very good question. I would recommend that you write that into your policy so that the council makes that determination, and it's there, it's been determined. I'd put it right into your compensation policy.
Alderman Wagner.
Thank you. Can you, we've been getting some interim reports from you on and off here through our own HR department. Do you have a ballpark figure of what it would cost us to implement this as it is written now?
I don't know, do we have staff here? Do we have anyone from finance here?
I apologize. We've been, over the last couple weeks, going through all the numbers and things like that. I know Jennifer and Jordan have some preliminary numbers, so we'll make sure that we get that to council ASAP.
And then Melina, if you would close your screen down.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's quite all right. No, I just thought of that, believe it or not. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty much speechless because I'm not quite sure where you're going with this thing. I understand. I've worked on like 3 of these in the last 10 years, 2 at county, 1 here. And what I'm troubled about is, what we had been troubled about was the concept of using the concept of STIPs and what we hired people at, what their hiring pay was, as opposed to what the average was, what there would be, what a person with the same experience and the same tenure in another company or another city would be earning an amount a lot more than our guy his first, second, third, or fourth year. So I see, if I'm not mistaken, what I think I've seen you do here, and I'm not opposed to it. I'm opposed to where I'm going to get the money to pay for it, but at the same time, what I am concerned about is, and that instead of hiring a guy that was, let's say, what's 5 times 2.5, 5 times 2.5, about 12.5. They're hired in at about 12.5% less than the skilled position or the average for that place. You basically just lopped that off and started them out at that what they're worth at the full level, right, at the average.
So the structure was built as step 5 is now your midpoint.
Right.
And step 5 is what we would consider that, I call it the sweet spot in the market, is when you have an experienced individual, that the closer you get to step 5, the closer you are to that rate of pay where your employees feel comfortable. They are saying, yes, this is really the going market rate for an individual that has the experience in that particular position. You would be hiring the person at step 1, which is at 10% under, and that gives you then a range of 10% down to 10% up, which is acceptable in compensation practice. So we would expect that you would hire them at step 1. If they have additional experience, you might be hiring them at a step higher. But that allows then the employee to progress through on an annual basis to get them up to that step 5, and then there's some additional steps above and beyond that as well.
That was put to me as saying, well, you're telling the guy that, or person that you're hiring that, okay, we like who you are, we think you can do the job, but you're gonna have to wait 5 years before you get paid at the rate.
Nope. Everything that's on that salary structure is market competitive. What we do is we make sure that your midpoint is aligned accordingly, that your minimum is aligned accordingly, and your maximum. So any step there will be market competitive.
So what you've done, you've programmed in the longevity with that, so that in other words, the person we're hiring isn't necessarily a rookie with 0 experience. It's probably somebody with 3 or 4 years of experience. You're saying we could actually hire them at that step 3 instead of step 1?
That would be up to what your compensation policies allow, but we certainly would say yes.
He or she would be earning what the average person with that much time on the job would earn, or is that more?
So I'm not sure that I'm following, other than longevity is not a factor because your step increase should be tied to some sort of a performance measure where they are identifying, showing that they can professionally perform the position.
So that means we're going to have to do some form of evaluation different than check the boxes.
That is completely up to the city.
I see a long road ahead of us. Thank you.
Alderman Weigel, then Alderman Stauber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, because I think you answered it, but let's make sure I have it understood correct. Because if we're angling to be at the 50% mark, is that correct to say that step 1 would be the 50% mark?
They all are. So what we do is we analyze the data, we analyze the market's minimum, the market's midpoint, the market's maximum, and then also the incumbents. And it's that collective of data that helps us make sure that everything in those salary ranges is at the 50th percentile.
Okay, you give me too much time to think.
That's okay.
Next question then with that, what advantage would there be if we were to, let's say, scale up to, and I'm fully aware of the irony of me being the one asking this, but if we're to go to like the 60% mark, what effect would that have on us?
Well, it would be very positive for your employees because what it will do is it's going to elevate up your ranges. Your midpoint is, well, all of these numbers are based on the 50th percentile. If we use the 60th percentile, then we call them your anchor. Your anchor points are going to elevate up, and then we're going to create a range around that. So it's going to elevate up your ranges.
So we'd expect, more continuity, less turnover, more retention. Okay,
yes, absolutely.
Alderman Stauber.
Thank you for the presentation, Milena. 3 things. One, you opened with a pretty strong statement. You said inflation is here, it's here to stay. I always view inflation as going up or down. What did you mean by your opening comments, here to stay?
So we would, in the current economy, at this point, we're all kind of hoping that that inflation is going to start leveling out back to the days when we were at 2%, 2.5%. But what we're seeing here is that wages is going to come in probably closer to 4% again this year, which is piggybacking off of the 8% last year. Most employers did not adjust a full 8%. And so it's more just the standard of, 1-2% just continues to not put employers where they need to be in the market. Did I answer your question?
Another question. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. And these are kind of philosophical questions that I'll kind of take with me as, recommendations are brought forward to the council. But the first one is, when you look at overall employee satisfaction, maybe we touched on this when you made a presentation remotely, but what is pay as an overall percentage of an employee's satisfaction typically?
Well, it depends. Right now, I would say that a year ago, wages was probably more important than employee satisfaction. Right now, I still think that to be true, but I think that once the economy starts to settle out, then the employees will start to rethink all of the extra benefits that come with enjoyable employment. And so it's not the end all, right? I mean, people don't typically always just leave for the money. They're normally leaving for the money plus something else, right? And that there was something that was the camel that broke the back, and they say that they've got to go. But however, you have to be able to be in the ballpark for the dollars to be able to help keep them here and keep their engagement. So on a normal year, I would say that wages ends up being almost third in line, but right now it's really toggling between number one and number two with benefits.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is one that you and I touched on before, but it's I have the phrase positive turnover. I'm not sure if that's a correct term or not, but in theory, it's not a bad thing when employees leave if they've been with the organization for 2 or 3 years, brought a certain, creative energy to the organization and moved on for career advancement, for example. Positive turnover, is that the right term? And could you just refresh my memory on what that means?
Yep, I absolutely can. So there's turnover, but not all turnover is bad, right? And so there is, I would call it positive turnover as well. And maybe healthy turnover is maybe the better terminology that I would use. We expect that there's going to be about a 10% turnover in your workforce. That would be pretty typical. When you start to go over that, however, that is an indication that you've got something else that's going wrong. Now, I can't always say what that is. I have not analyzed your turnover data. That would be something that your HR would want to do. It could be wages, it could be work environment, it could be culture, it could be any number of things. But you're absolutely right in that there are times when healthy turnover, it's necessary for an organization because you get clean, fresh ideas that come into the organization. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to lose your Uber staff, right? You don't, they are your future, they are your succession planning. And so you want to make sure that there's a balance there where you're not necessarily losing, key positions.
Okay, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, +1 to everyone's comments. Thanks, Milena, for the presentation and all the information. I was wondering if you could talk through, in your experience, if you've seen major changes to things like benefits, vacation, et cetera, when making changes like this to a pay structure.
Typically, if we had done benefits, we would be telling you that we need you, or we would be recommending that you look at benefits separately. We could tell you this is how you look in terms of your wages, here's how you look in terms of your benefits. But most times your benefits, say your insurances, the voluntary benefits that you're offering your employees, there needs to be discussions with your insurance brokers, maybe even additional retirement advisors, and all of that takes time. So most benefits are not easily changed. The low-hanging fruit becomes things like holiday, flexible work and arrangements. The city, you've already done that. You've already taken positive initiatives for that, and we can give you then other options that are out there that employees, the new workforce, are looking for. But again, then it needs to go to HR, it needs to be vetted. What's the true cost? And what's the value to the employees? Because we could give you 10 options, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your workforce is looking for. You almost would be, it would be beneficial to ask your employee base what kind of benefits they're looking for, and then, what is possible financially, what's possible.
Is there anything that you've seen in terms of trends? I mean, in my career, I've seen pretty much any time a company does some sort of restructure or reclassification of job titles or things like that, typically there's some sort of pay adjustments that come with it, or, bands, salary bands, et cetera. But then also it seems like whether it's immediate or shortly after, there seems to be some sort of change to those types of things. So a lot of times an employee will get a bump because they're in a new classification, but then all of a sudden within a year, the benefits change and now they're paying a higher premium. So is there anything that you've seen that's a trend that we should be prepared to anticipate if we, adjust the salary bands and steps accordingly?
I think the only I wouldn't call it a trend, but just be watchful of being able to, maintaining it. And, your first hurdle or your first step is going to be the implementation of how that's going to look and how long it's going to take for your employees to do that. And if you can't do a full implementation right away, HR, your administration, your department directors, they're going to have to be cognizant of how much are those current employees earning versus how much are the new employees earning, and whether or not you're going to have some in-range compression. In-range compression issues is secondary to the implementation, I'm sorry to say, because most are going to be looking at what they need to do to get the initial implementation. We don't want you to forget about it either, and that might make people feel bad that they're earning very close. More tenured individuals are earning very close to what newer employees are earning, but we need to prioritize what we need to prioritize your recommendations. And the first and foremost is get everyone into the salary structure that's market competitive. Then secondarily, as soon as your dollars allow for it, then you can talk about in-range adjustments.
Thank you. Last question. Is this something that as you transfer into this STEP program that you see the potential for people to either be promoted or drop down a level to fall into the appropriate range or category?
So when we do and that's a very good question, especially if there's any employees that are listening, but what we recommend is that you are placed at the step closest to what you were earning without taking a decrease, because we don't want anyone to have a cut in pay. I feel very confident in that we do not have any red circle situations. We would not have anyone in red circle.
Any other questions or comments from Elena? Seeing none, thank you again.
Thank you.
And great to see you in person.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Item P, request to award bid for Adler Road multi-use trail project presented by Tom Turchi, Director of Public Works.
All right, this morning we opened bids for the project at the Adler Road Trail project from Sycamore Avenue to Weber Park. Of that, we received 2 bids for this work. The low bid was submitted by Earth Incorporated of Arpin, Wisconsin, in the amount of $539,534.30. Note, we have seen construction costs again rise about 20% as compared to 2023 construction. The 2 bids were from Earth Incorporated and Haas Sons Incorporated. The project budget analysis that we had was Earth Incorporated bid at $539,534.30. What we've spent for design, real estate, and DOT review, which is not included in this contract amount to date, is $111,181. We are anticipating some construction inspection services, which were not included in this contract, which we are trying to negotiate right now through an RFP, and those are estimated at about $69,000 for a total cost of construction of $719,175.30. The project funding for this project in the 2024 budget was $475,000. Of that, the TAP project that is funding this at 80-20 split was $340,000 grant funding. And then we were going to use room tax of $35,000 and long-term debt at $110,000. So we have a shortfall in this of about $244,715.30. Reviewing the cost versus the budgeted funding for this project, that shortfall of about $245,000, I did start by contacting the Wisconsin Department of Transportation as soon as we opened bids this morning, and asked if there could be an adjustment to the state municipal agreement, because this state municipal agreement was completed back in 2020 before we saw some of these larger increases due to inflation. They are going to take a look at that and are going to let me know if there's a possibility of supplying additional funding for this project through the state municipal agreement later this week. I'm actively also researching some other grant opportunities that will help reduce the overall request from the anticipated shortfall of $245,000. I know this may seem very rushed turnaround on the approval and award notice needs to be into the DOT by this Friday in order to keep this project in the Wisconsin Department of Transportation 2024 fiscal year. Failure to meet this deadline may result in loss for the grant funding of $340,000. This project's been quite a challenge in the timelines that we've been given to get this project out for bid. We were only given 3 days from the time we were noticed to get an advertisement in the paper, which was not the schedule that we had proposed to the Board of Public Works back when we had the project layout for this. The DOT has kind of made things a little bit difficult. The PS&E documentation, we had purchased the PLEs and TLEs only a week prior to the PS&E documentation being required. And then in another instance, after we got the PS&E in, we were notified by the DNR that we had to have all the trees down on the project before March 31st of this year. And that was only a week prior to that actually happening. So it's been kind of a challenge meeting the timelines of this. Currently, we have approximately $363,000 left of the $475 remaining in the budget due to the late start of this project, which is going to be mid-October or August of this year. The city may not see all the bills from the DOT for all this work until 2025. So in the short term, I would suggest that the state trust fund loan would be taken out and to fund any bills in excess of the $363,000. Therefore, I would recommend that contract 2024-05 Adler Road multi-use trail be awarded to the low bidder Earth Incorporated of Arpin, Wisconsin in the amount of $539,534.30 and to authorize the execution of a contract. I further recommend that funding shortfall of $244,715.30, not to exceed. My goal is to try to see if I can reduce that as much as possible, be funded through a state trust loan fund here in 2024. Are there any questions?
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Tom, and also a shout out to the people who cut those trees down. I heard that they did it like a horrible week of weather. And they just had to, I think it was our Parks Department and our Streets Department that went out and did that.
Yes.
So thank you for the guys who went out and when we were all cozy inside. I have a few questions. One, did this same thing happen with the Lincoln Trail where there was a shortfall and then you went back to the DOT and asked if they could adjust that 80-20, how much they were giving for the 80%?
In the Lincoln Avenue project, there was a shortfall there. There was a combination of things that were done to fulfill that shortfall. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They do realize that there has been some inflation. And with this project being from 2020 originally planned, to today, 20% is probably a pretty reasonable cost because we saw asphalt costs in 2023 and 2022 jump 15 to 18% per year for each year. So.
And we have already spent on the project that's already been billed. Is that $110,000? Is that correct?
$111,181. It includes the right-of-way we've purchased and easements we've purchased, as well as paying for all the trees that we had to remove with this project.
Okay. And then I guess this is a question for Jennifer. Sorry. Do you know how this affects our borrowing capacity?
As we'll see in just a little bit, when I get into the debt, it could pinch us if we had to borrow this in 2024, which it could get us to a level that we are not comfortable with in borrowing. And in 2025, the project will be done and we can't necessarily borrow in 25 to pay back expenditures that we put in 2024. The state trust fund loan is a separate loan than our annual borrowing, so it would be the best option if that were the only option to fulfill that shortfall. Meaning no more money from the DOT or whatever.
Okay. And so, Tom, when you realistically look at what would be potentially an adjustment by the DOT, potentially grants, like if you, I know this you can't see and you can't predict, but do you have any sense of how that might change the shortfall?
I think that from some of the information I've found recently, we may see that we are actually probably in a good position to get this done and reduce that number quite a bit.
Does quite a bit mean like 50% or?
I don't want to give you a number. If I were to bet,
okay.
I'd like to give you 100%, but we'll see how this all works and plays out.
All right, thank you so much.
Alderman Werman, then Alderman Stauber.
Thanks, Tom. So we've been talking about this one for a little bit, and like you just mentioned with the easements and purchasing that we've gone through, this has come through quite a few times. I'm just curious, the 20% increase, I mean, was there anything that called out to you specifically as to why that jumped up? Any specific materials, or is it labor, or is it a short time frame?
Well, we wouldn't see an actual labor cost because the contractors are bidding on the actual items in place. And the contractors who bid on this were actually only 1.3% difference in their actual bid between each other. There were a couple items here or there that were up or down 5-10%. Throughout the entire contract, but it's basically how one contractor bids items versus another contractor.
Okay, gotcha. And then I think my big question from this is, regardless of what we decide tonight, it seems like we got a pretty key piece of information with getting those numbers back and realizing we're seeing a 20% increase. How are we going to reflect that on our other projects that we're looking at right now? Are we going back to look at those numbers to figure that out and kind of readjust accordingly? Or is it just something we kind of expect going forward and we'll deal with it when it comes? Or what's the process there?
Well, when we do the capital improvement program, we do take a look at those and we do make adjustments periodically as we go through the capital improvement program to try to balance projects in the future as they come along.
Thank you.
Alderman Stauber.
Yes, one question, Tom. Have we explored any opportunity for private-public partnership, Friends of the Trails, something like that?
Russ, contact has been made with Friends of the Trails this morning, and we are exploring that right now.
Thank you.
Alderman Weigel.
Thank you. Help me out here. It's been a long day. Best case scenario, what happens with that? With the loan that we're looking for here? And granted, we don't have the answers yet. I know that. What are we looking for? Best case scenario
for where we end up, or
yeah, yes, correct. Yes.
Okay. Best case scenario, we get $245,000 in various pieces to fit the puzzle, and then we fit it within the budget we have.
Okay, and then worst case scenario,
$245,000.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so then.
But with that discussions I've had, I do feel we'll be getting something.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking just to put it in reference there, what's best, what's worst. But I do believe Jennifer had mentioned that it might impact our vote depending on her presentation after that. So would it be appropriate to make a motion to table this, Jennifer's presentation?
Or no, we could table till after the presentation.
Right. Yeah. No, not just further down the line in the agenda, not different date, because I know we're time sensitive for Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That is a motion.
Andrew makes a motion to table, and Alderman Spiros seconds. Any other discussion? Please vote on tabling it until after the next discussion. Is that correct, or we have to?
Mr. Stauber has his hand.
I'm sorry.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
As an option, I don't know which would be more feasible or accommodating, but as long as the body is in the same session, anyone from the majority rule can bring something up for reconsideration during that meeting, if I'm correct, the Robert's Rule of Order. So we don't necessarily have to table it. We can bring it back up later in the meeting if we have second thoughts on the action we take right now.
So you got to move forward because you got a motion. For that.
Right.
We have a motion and a second to table it, and since this has happened, we need to move forward. Alderman Tompkins?
Could you specify when we are tabling it for the motion?
Mr. Reigel did specify that it would be after the discussion point, which is next on the agenda, the debt discussion.
Right, so just switching the order of those two items.
All those in favor?
Mr. Sauber?
No.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Yes.
That motion passes. We will move on to item Q, receive update on the city's debt and review 2024 borrowing, including the potential to borrow for the purchase of a new fire engine scheduled for delivery in 2026, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
Good evening. So I want to go a little bit out of order with your packet, and I want to start, if you're following along online, on page 56, which would be the ARPA project review. It's been a little bit since we've talked about our ARPA funding, and I wanted to give a little update on where we're at. In 2021, the city received a grant of $1.933 million from the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery program. At that time, staff met and devised a plan to spend the funds throughout the city. The plan has been reviewed and modified, and council-approved expenditures were incorporated, which were then incorporated in budgets for 2022, 2023, and 2024. Some projects have been completed, some under budget, and some have been abandoned for various reasons. The grant does require that funds be obligated by the end of this year, or they will need to be remitted back to the federal government. And what we mean by obligated is actually committed on a contract, either through a purchase order or some other formal agreement to spend the money. Our intentions don't matter. And that's sort of why some of these projects have been abandoned. For instance, the affordable housing plan, we didn't have staff to actually start that program. So $100,000 that was initially approved back in 2022 kind of went back to the general pot to be reallocated. So therefore, we've taken a look at all the projects that we had on the list from 2022, what we allocated, what we actually spent, and that change. At the end of the day, since that time, you did approve spending $170,000 on the new ambulance. And after that on the list, 14th Street, network pen test, traffic signal, and street department roof replacements would all be activity that we've talked about internally that you haven't seen before as repurposing those funds that were not spent previously. We also had a little bit of unallocated ARPA at the end of 2023 that we've since allocated to these projects. What that means is the 14th Street and the street department roof replacement avoids borrowing. The pen test and the traffic signal LED replacement program frees up a little bit of money in the general fund balance. So what I would be looking for tonight from council is that you approve of the reallocations of these monies for the project. And if you want to wait until the end of, I'll walk through the 2024 borrowing at that time, or you can do it now. I'm just not sure how you want to take the pieces of the presentation.
Any comments? Jennifer, just do what you feel is right. Correct, everybody? Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move forward. Next, Per our policy 4.9, I need to give you a review of where we're at with debt. So if we'll bounce back to page 44, if you're following online, that is our summary where I've shown all of our debt issues as of now, which would include our 2024 payments, but not any amounts yet borrowed for 2024. We owe a total of principal of $41,661,000. And if you include the loan that the CDA has taken on our behalf, it's another $1.6 million. So all owed in principal at this time is $43,276,376. Those principal payments go out through 2042. If we go further down, if you're following online, I've given us a snapshot of where the debt levy will be as of today's data for the next 5 years. So at this point in time, we would be levying $4,334,000 just for the general government funds. There may be a need to also levy for the EMS portion of the building for $167,000. So our total levy at this point in time for 2025 would be $4.5 million. And then it goes down from there. And what happens is each year as we borrow, we fill that gap to achieve a certain levy rate. In the past, our financial advisor has tried to talk in terms of dollars per levy, and he's tried to present that as being about $2 to $2.50 per thousand, but that's kind of hard to grasp. And we're trying to think of it now as how much do we want to levy for our taxes, and that's where you have a little bit of control. You'll recall that the levy is made up of two parts. Our operating levy, which the state gives us, it only covers about half of our operating budget, so we have to use all of it. The second part of the levy is for debt, and that has to be sufficient to meet our current principal and interest payments, but where we have a little bit of flexibility is how we structure those payments. So if you only want to levy the $4,071,000, let's say in 2026, when we go through the borrowing process, we would stretch payments out past that and farther into the future and fill up those gaps further down the line. The next part of the update, we'll talk about our debt limit. The statutory requirements say that we cannot exceed 5% of our equalized value. Our 2023 equalized value percentage is $105 million. We then currently limit that by 65% through city policy. So our limit for debt is $68 million. Today, recall we're at the $41,661 before adding in our 2024 borrowing. So we could borrow at this point in time $26 million and still not go over our limit. Now, when we're talking about potentially borrowing for this project that Tom talked about earlier, we can borrow the money, but it all depends on how and where you want to place that levy. Do you want to add that to the tax burden through the debt levy? Next, we'll go through how our debt is, how it gets paid. Some of our debt gets paid through our TIF districts, and that is almost $10 million worth of our principal. So that does not get added through the general levy. It just comes, it's assessed to those properties and pays off their debt. So of that 41 million, about 10 of it is coming directly through the TIF districts. Overall, the city levy is, including principal and interest, is about 75% of our obligation. So our obligation right now, including interest, is just under 48 million, and the city taxpayers will pay about 75% of that. Some things to note, TIF District 12, which is our 120 acres of land that's ready for development, currently has debt that was used to purchase the property, but no increments. So there is a little bit of negative cash flow in that TIF district. The levy for 2024 will include EMS debt and probably for 2025 as well. Additional borrowings for 2024, 2025 will include a revenue obligation bond, which is a little different in the wastewater for, it's a clean water fund loan, and that would be paid for by fees generated through the wastewater utility. In 2024, our borrowing will include items for CIP, which you have approved in the past, as well as for our new project in TIF District 13 for the housing development. So with that, that is our kind of the summary of where we are currently at with debt. I'll stop in case there are questions. There's nothing to approve or change with that. It would just be questions if you have any.
Seeing no questions, Jennifer, thank you for that.
I'm not quite finished. I'll introduce next the borrowing for 2024, just because it's going to look a little bit differently than what you had initially seen. So if we go back in your packet to page 47, this will be what I'm currently working on for borrowing for this year. There's been a few changes since you last seen and approved, and mainly those are highlighted in yellow. Because we are including borrowing for TID 13 and our Green Acres infrastructure, the cost of the borrowing will go up. Some of the costs are taken as a percentage of the borrowing. So if we were only borrowing $4.5 million, I had estimated those to be around 120,000. The estimate now is 180. That could change depending on the work that all of the different parties that compile our borrowing will charge. As far as projects, there is a new concern with the police department and some security upgrades that was not in the CIP that they are looking to add to the borrowing for this year. And it's $14,000 for some bulletproof glass and security options in their entryway. And what I am proposing to do is to take that $14,000 from the City Hall Municipal Court security upgrades. There is actually some fund balance in our municipal court. We service Spencer and Stratford, and there's fund balance in there that can make up the difference. So proposing to just reduce the borrowing and take from fund balance for that project so that we can address the concerns in the police department. Additionally, there is an opportunity from the manufacturer to prepay for our fire engine that's slated for delivery in 2026. That prepayment comes with a discount, and it's about $168,000 worth of discount. It may be strategically advantageous to borrow for it in 2024 if we decide to move forward with a police department building, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail in a second. And then the last change that I wanted to go over was the funding source for the street department roof project. We had slated that project to occur over a couple of different years. doing the east half and the west half separately. We had also slated $75,000 for electrical services upgrade, which we really didn't have a good plan at this time of what we would be doing. So as part of trying to make the best use of our borrowing funds, we currently have an RFP out for that roof department, and we are hopeful that we would be able to have a quote that comes in using the ARPA funds of the 190 and this repurposing the electrical service upgrade of $75,000 to do both halves of the roof at one time instead of separating that out over years. And then lastly, we'll be scheduling a borrowing for the Green Acres infrastructure. Right now, we have that slated at $4 million. There's just a couple more cost quotes that we are waiting on that could drive that down just a little bit. Getting back to the Adler Road project, we could slate that in for this year. There is a little bit of room. It just, the schedules that I'm going to show you next won't reflect that scenario. So if we continue on in your packet, the blue pages are simply the capital improvement plan that was used for the payment table projections. It encompasses our CIP for 2024 to 2028 because we're still in process for 2029. So it could look a little differently once we build in that extra year. So in that blue section, you'll notice that we have slated in a police department building of $4.6 million in 2025 and $5.4 million in 2026. So there was a couple of reasons why we are built a model to reflect that scenario. We generally have to keep our borrowing less than $10 million, otherwise it bumps us into a different interest rate category because it's a non-bank qualified loan. So if we structure that building over 2 years and do the borrowing, we have enough to get started on the construction in 1 year, borrow for it, and then have a second borrowing the next year, which would mean for 2024 to 2026 that we would be having that borrowing level of $9+ million for 3 years in a row. If we look at table 2, this gives us, it's our financing plan for the current CIP that we have, 2024 to 2028, without the PD building. And it just summarizes the type of borrowing and who would be paying for it. In table 3, we actually start to get how much the debt levy would be if we dropped in the next year's borrowing. So without our current CIP as it stands, we're at that levy price point of about $4.9 million a year. And that, if we keep our CIP at that level, that's what we can expect in future years. If you go on to the next schedule, that schedule drops in the potential for a police building along with our 5-year CIP plan without making any changes. At the end of the day, that results in a levy being pushed $5.6, $5.7, $5.8 million. Over, you'll see it in the 5 years through 2028, that's where we're approaching. Schedule 3, structured payments. He was just, our financial advisor was trying to display two different ways that he could build out the payment table. But at the end of the day, it still results in that net levy of $5.7, $5.8 million. The last table that we will take a look at just really talks more about our debt limit and our statutory debt limit that I displayed earlier. This one would take into account those additional borrowings. So with that, I think we'll take a pause and let you ask some questions, and then we'll go back to approval of the ARPA plan and the changes in this debt schedule, namely what you'll have to decide on the 2024 issuance is if we move forward with borrowing for that fire engine in 2024 or leaving it in 2026.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, I have a bunch of questions, sorry. Okay, the first one is, so I heard you say that we would start to borrow for the police department in 24.
So the CIP for 2024 would include a borrowing, no police department borrowing in 2024, 2025.
25, okay. And so that would be anticipated beginning of whatever construction renovation is happening.
Correct.
Do you think that's realistic in the sense of how long it takes to get plans done and bidding and all that?
It may not, we may not incur $4.6 million worth of construction costs in 2025, but the timing of our borrowing is such that we get halfway through the year. We actually don't get our proceeds from our borrowing until July. And so it would be, put us in a cash flow issue if we didn't borrow in 2025, even though we wouldn't incur those expenditures, because I wouldn't be able to borrow for 2026 until much later in the year, and we have to pay those vendors and contractors as they are billing us. So it's more of a cash timing issue to structure it that way.
Okay. Do you think, so we were talking about if you get the cash flow in July, like maybe a year from now, do you anticipate that a year from now, we've all made a decision on what's happening with the police station and it's actually starting?
This model displays a possibility. Your decision timing, if you don't feel ready to make that decision, it's just an opportunity for you to see how it might look should you decide to go that way.
Okay, perfect. I was not on the council when the fire station was built. Was that built based on this sort of borrowing, or was it based on a referendum where taxes were approved by the citizens?
I believe it was built, part of our annual borrowing. I don't believe there was a referendum needed for that building.
Yeah, I wasn't here then either, actually. I don't know what actually started that. I don't know what actually started that process.
Okay, I don't know either.
Yeah, there was some back and forth on the amount of. There was some back and forth on the amount of money we would borrow, and there was we knew we were holding on tight to the city's goal of maintaining keeping the borrowing at 3 to 3.5 million, trying to keep it within that range. And that we ended up doing that, and the rest of the library, I think almost $4 million was raised locally for that library. And we only put in 3.5, and that did not include the community center.
You're talking about the fire station.
I am talking about the fire
station.
Yeah, and I think there was a referendum.
The fire station was roughly the same way.
There was a referendum at some point, but that was to determine whether or not we look at a single station versus a satellite station. But ultimately, the money was borrowed for it. It seems like it was in the neighborhood of $7.5 million. But that's my remembrance. Am I on the right track, Jody? Is that what you were going to say?
just to clarify, I don't know specifically about the numbers for that, but the referendum that did go through for the fire station just was regarding the geographic area to have the station placed in. That was what the referendum was about. It was nothing about funds.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. I had one more question, but I forget what it is, so I'm going to yield the floor.
Alderman Werman.
Thanks, Jennifer. So one of the reasons I asked Tom about like that 20% construction increase is stuff like this. So right away, like looking at 10 million for that police building, I want to say the last number we got for like the remodeling was like 12 to 13 and a new building was 15. And now you start thinking long-term and adding on potentially 20% increases year over year. I mean, that number really starts to inflate. So then I wonder, is it worth looking at borrowing 10 million over the next 2 years, or are we going to be borrowing 20 to 30 million? So I just wanted to throw that out there, but I do appreciate you guys putting that in there. It is helpful to see those things. Secondly, I wanted to bring up the fire engine. So you had mentioned that and kind of building that in because of the discount. And I forget, did you say 160 or 260?
$168,000 would be the discount if we were to pay it all in this year. If you don't feel that the police station is going to happen, we would be waiting until 2026 to borrow $1.1 million. Dollars at that time.
And I'm way oversimplifying it in my head, and I know that because you put a lot of work into this. So I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, going back to Tom's request, we would essentially, if we couldn't approve that tonight, we would be throwing away potentially $340,000 in grant money. And so when I'm looking at that benefit versus the benefit of saving the $160,000, I'm just thinking, if we could, I would rather take that, and then if we eat that $160,000 in 2 years, so be it, because we still would net $180,000 in savings. So I'm just trying to process everything. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly off the screen. So
right, we could absolutely, if that were the direction of council, is to eliminate the borrowing for the fire department and bring in borrowing for Tom's project. The only concern I would have to bringing it in at this time is that if the DOT were to approve additional funding, we would have overfunding for the project. So in my mind, it would make sense to do a small separate borrowing towards the end of the year from our state trust fund loan, which is a really simple process to tide us, bridge that gap, essentially.
okay. Is there, well, two questions then. One would be, in terms of the fire engine, are we pulling it forward because it's a good deal, or is there a need that has been escalated?
A little bit of both. If we're going with that strategy of building a police building, we would be over that $10 million mark in a future year, which we would pay a premium in interest to do so. But, if we don't go forward with the police building in that time period, we aren't, there isn't, at this point, we're well under that cap.
Sure. And then second question, could you just give a high level pros and cons of if we were to do both? Because it sounds like there's potentially a little bit of risk there, but also I think, like I said, we'd be leaving money on the table in either scenario. And I think essentially pigeonholing ourselves from, like you said, if we were to borrow for the building, if that's something we decide to do and we don't do that for the fire engine now, then I think we're kind of putting ourselves between a rock and a hard place. From the sounds of it. So could you talk about the pros and cons of maybe if we were to do the fire engine and the Adler Trail project, and what is our risk?
You have capacity and debt, so there's no risk there. It's just it becomes a question of how much you want to place on the debt tax levy, the debt side. And how much you want to spread that out. So right now we're about that $4.8 million on the debt side. If we do both projects, our model doesn't incorporate that, but if we looked at that schedule, it would add just a little bit more, maybe this would probably be a 10-year borrowing if we had to do the 245. It could be spread out over 10 years, so a minimal amount more But it's almost, I have to move forward with what we have, given the timing that we have with our financial advisor on selling our bonds. And without having confirmation from the DOT on money, I feel like it's a little premature to borrow for that piece of the pie. Like literally, I'm going to send him an email after tonight and he'll be moving forward with the borrowing, and we won't hear back from the DOR until later this week.
If I could, one more question then, and this will be directed towards Tom, and if we could, since we're going to be revisiting the topic, we could address it afterwards, but I'm just curious then, so in terms of timeline, if we were to move forward and had to hold off on borrowing that 245 so we don't incorporate it here, because to Jennifer's point, it's a little premature because we don't know what the DOT is going to say. We don't know about private-public donations. What are we looking at? I mean, are we in a situation like we just ran into with parks where, you know, we hit Brand Park and all of a sudden it's like, we got to pull back. We don't have the money and we can't get it anywhere else. And then we just stop. Or is this something we can solve down the line, I guess is what I'm asking.
That's a hard question to answer. If we were to pull back and not do it, the fiscal year for the SMA basically expires, and then we'd either have to reapply, and then all of our easements and everything expire, and then we'd have to redo that. I do feel very positive about getting some additional funding in here to fill that gap. So it's hard to say right now. I can't make any comments based on some of the phone calls I had today, but I was very positive.
Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. Just to clarify, Jennifer, when you said it was premature to borrow, you were talking about putting this deficit or the shortfall onto our bonds. You weren't talking about it's premature to do a state loan further on in the year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just clarifying that.
Yep.
Okay.
It's premature for the 2024 borrowing at this point.
Thank you.
Alderman Stauber?
Thank you, Mayor. Getting in the weeds a little bit on the fire engine purchase, and I'm not sure if this is your expertise or not, but I'm kind of curious who from the city is negotiating for the purchase of the fire engine. And maybe to you, Jennifer, does that 15% discount, $168,000 in today's economic climate, does that seem like it's a good deal? I'm thinking we could probably negotiate better. I don't know. Speculating.
The ordering of the fire truck occurred at the department level, so that would be the chief's area. As for whether it's a great deal, we're currently earning 5% in our bank account, so it's a wash from that perspective. But it's an opportunity. Also, you're paying for something 2 years prior to taking possession of the item. So be comfortable with that.
My angle on this is the overall demand for fire engines in a somewhat economic climate where maybe other municipalities are not buying brand new fire engines. Is the demand up or down for the manufacturer, and therefore can we leverage for a better discount? That's where I'm going with that.
I'll give you a little background on what I know. In short, the engine project started in 2022 to be put in the 2023 CIP. In 2023, this engine was put in the CIP for 2026, as Jennifer said, and that was the schedule that we were going on. There is a huge demand for new engines out there, and there's a reason why you can't get an engine for 36 to 48 months after you order them. When 30 years ago, you could get one in less than a year. So the demand is still out there. So the manufacturers, like I said, right now it's 36 to 48 months. From what I've heard in the industry, it's more towards 48 months to get an engine. So that's what I'm seeing in the industry with other chiefs. So does that answer your question?
So, Chief, you think that 15% is pretty generous on the part of the manufacturer then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, regarding the fire engine, is this a locked-in price? If we pay it, it's locked in. There's nowhere in the contract where they can say, oops, look, the cost of all of this went up and, you know, there's a loophole and we're going to still provide you your engine, but we're going to take all of this stuff off, all of these bells and whistles off because we just can't afford to build it for that price.
I did reach out to the manufacturer with that very question, and the response I got was essentially, our price is our price. Everything that they're putting on the truck would be that included in that price. Rarely they have to change out if some vendor goes out of business for a ladder, but they'll replace it with something comparable. So I would not expect the price of this truck to be more in 2026 when we take delivery of it.
Any other questions, comments?
I assume you want to start with a motion on the ARPA piece, correctly?
Yes, it all sort of ties together. We need to use ARPA to avoid the borrowing. We need to approve the borrowing as it is without really a lot of change to that ARPA plan. Otherwise, we go back to the drawing board on the 2024 borrowing. So you can do it together or you can take it in pieces with the ARPA schedule being first.
We have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, and your motion is?
My motion is to approve the ARPA schedule as it's been modified and presented.
And Alderman Fire, is that a second? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote on that motion.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion's approved.
And then we would be looking for a motion on what you would like to do with the 2024 issuance of our long-term debt, mainly with the minor changes, and then whether or not to move forward with including the borrowing for the fire truck.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, and your motion is?
To approve everything that she just mentioned.
Very good. Second by Alderman Tompkins, and you agree?
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. Personally, I think that having this discount and doing this now and giving us more leeway to look at the police station and borrowing is important. So I just want to say that.
Any other discussion?
Can I just ask for clarification on that motion on what you had said that he approved?
Including the fire truck in the 2024 borrowing.
Yeah,
and when was there a change to the debt schedule?
It would be as presented in the packet for a total borrowing of $9,950,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
I will revisit item P. Alderman Fire makes a motion, and your motion is? There you go, thank you.
To pursue the issue with Tom and to do the state borrowing to lower the levy. So that's what the motion is. That's what you want now, right? Temporarily.
Just follow the recommendation, maybe?
Yep.
That's in the memo?
Yep.
Alderman Varsh, are you?
Yes.
Alderman Tompkins and Alderman Stauber.
Okay, Tom, I'm just going to revisit the numbers again, especially after you spoke about what we would lose. So we've already put in 111,000 that we won't get back. Mm-hmm. And if we decided to do this next year, we would have to redo a lot of that stuff. Right. So we'd be paying double. And then if we don't approve this bid by Friday, how much of a grant do we lose?
The TAP grant is 80-20 split, and it's $340,000.
Okay, and potentially we could reapply for that, but it doesn't always look great when you lose a grant and then try to get it again. Okay, so total, that would be $451,000 that we would sort of lose. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Stauber?
No. I was going to second the motion, but...
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Reilly?
No.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Item R, request to schedule special council meetings for review of proposed 2025-2029 capital improvement program, CIP, Thursday, June 13th and Thursday, June 27th, both at 6 o'clock, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we'd hoped to have these meetings last month, but there's been a lot going on at staff level. I think we've talked about that with the Daniel Holmes project and TID 13 and some other things. I'll give credit to Tom Turchi. He's been leading the process well. We're ready to come before the council here shortly. So you see in the agenda, it does say the 13th and 27th of June. The mayor brought to my attention earlier that on the 13th, there's actually a tourism banquet by the Visit Marshfield folks. And so we don't want to conflict with that. Some of you may well be going to that. So we'd like to hold the June 27th meeting toward the end of the month as a second CIP meeting to go through the projects. Look at moving the first one, possibly, I would suggest Wednesday, June 12th. I realize that that's the night after a regular council meeting, but it's the closest date. Would certainly entertain any other suggestions if you want to make them for the first meeting. But otherwise, my recommendation would be Wednesday, June 12th and Thursday, June 27th, both at 6 p.m.
I have a motion by Alderman Varsho, a second by Alderman Weigel. Alderman Spiros?
All right, so I'm just trying to get all of this clear. I need to pull out my phone. If anyone objects, I'm pulling it out to look at my calendar. So these are just your CIP meetings that you're talking about?
Correct. It's where we spend
Okay, I got that. But when are we going to have the budget meetings, the pre-budget meetings that we talked about? I think all of this goes together. You want us to go and talk about the CIP and what we're going to approve, all of this borrowing and spending and projects that we're going to do. We don't have an estimate on what it's going to cost to raise the employees' wages. We don't. These pieces and parts and the way they're being presented, just like tonight, putting Tom's agenda on before putting the HR or putting the finance director up, it feels like this is not a good way to go about things. So the pre-budget meetings have been canceled twice. So I'm just wondering if we're doing this in the proper order or if there's a better way to do this. I don't like to get pieces and parts to things and then go ahead and look like we gave our approval. And then later on, we find out we have all this other debt and then you can't back out of it because the staff's already spent $100,000 on it. We're going to lose it. I'm just really sick of that. And so I don't know if we're doing this in the correct order. And I'm just wondering when we're going to get those special budget meetings that's been requested for 6 months now. When are those going to get scheduled?
Okay, just to back up earlier tonight, we again reminded everybody that we will be meeting on at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, June 11th. That'll be the first meeting. There may be others to follow, but the first meeting in terms of talking about the 2025 budget, trying to lay down the foundation of where we stand and what some of the challenges and opportunities are. I do apologize. We'd hoped to hold that earlier in the year, and we just didn't get to it. Typically, the CIP meetings would have been held slightly earlier too. First meeting on the CIP that I'm suggesting right now is the following night on Wednesday, June 12th. So those would be back-to-back evenings. Hopefully between the two of them would provide a pretty good look at the playing field that we're facing with respect to operating and capital expenses and other issues. It's not ideal, I agree, but it's what we have right now. We definitely want to move forward in June and have some pretty significant financial conversations with the council. I do want to add, as far as the order of the agenda items tonight, we really were not anticipating the overage that Tom got on the bid opening earlier today. And I admit that that's been a tight time frame, but that shortfall of nearly $250,000 was highly unanticipated. Otherwise, I think that item would have been after the debt update that Jennifer gave. So I do appreciate the frustration, and hopefully we're ready to move forward with some pretty significant financial conversations about the future of our finances in June.
Yeah, if I can follow up, I just think, a CIP is a wish list. It's like creating your Christmas list. Of course, it's things that we need. I don't want to minimize that, but those are the things that, those are the things you can move around. Some of those you can push off. Lots of those you can push off. Some of them you can't. There's other things that cannot be pushed off at this point. And I think those are the things that we need to get a good grasp of, a good understanding of before we go ahead and approve a CIP, which is always a fluid document, and I get that. But it feels like this budget and the CIP is being too pieced and parted out for us to follow a clear trail of what we're spending money on, what's coming up. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, we hear about these projects and every one of them are coming 20% over because of inflation, and the next one's going to be 20% over, and then it's going to be 20% over and 20% over. And our preparation, I think, is poor at best, and I want to be better prepared. And I don't know how to do that, but I just feel like we're not doing things in the correct order.
Alderman Werman?
So hearing Rebecca's comments, I've got two questions. One, we just heard again tonight that 20% increase. So that's a lot of projects to go back and refigure for the CIP for any kind of meeting that we're going to be discussing in 2 weeks. So A, is that enough time? And, and then B, if I could, Steve, before you jump in, I think to Rebecca's point, we're cramming a lot in a short amount of time. So doing a budget meeting on the 11th and then having to meet the next day on the CIP, it's not a lot of time to digest that. I mean, would we be remiss to maybe move that at least out a week and meet the following week for the first one if we're going to continue down that trajectory? Or I think Rebecca's looking to go out a little further with those so we can get some more budget meetings in there. But just in general, could we try to provide a little buffer time to digest all that information? Because I think that is the hard part, is we're coming into a lot of this either day of or very short notice and then trying to make decisions based on that. And I absolutely agree. I think there's been a lot of pickles we've been put in where we make a decision or we don't make a decision, and either way it comes back to bite us, or could come back to bite us because I wouldn't say lack of information, but reduced information in a short time frame.
Just to start with the first thing you said and kind of unpack it, I think we were caught off guard. I think Tom was caught off guard by the 20% over budget on this Adler Trail Road project. Truthfully, if you remember the Denyon project, we were concerned about whether or not that would come in well, and that came in under budget by quite a bit. That allowed us to do the District 13 improvement out there at 21st and Washington. I don't know if we can really say at this point that we can expect projects. If you want to go to the podium, that's fine, Tom. If we expect some of these capital projects to come in at 20% like this trail project did or not.
And here's another good example. We just finished bidding the tertiary filter project for the wastewater treatment plant. The original estimate on that was actually at $14 million. And when we opened it, it came at $10,300,000. So that one came in under budget too, quite a bit. So it varies on the types of projects. Our construction project, 14th Street, that one came in over again. That was, and that's a more, maybe has to deal with more of the road construction versus being building construction. It's hard to say at this point.
But thanks, Tom. Going back to your other point as far as the timing, I mean, it's not ideal. I mean, we're going to have on Tuesday night, June 11th, we're going to have a budget meeting at 5 o'clock, a regular meeting at 6:30. And what I'm basically saying here is come back the next night at 6 o'clock and talk about CIP. So even if in fact you're not concerned about too much information overload on Tuesday night and then coming right back on Wednesday, you may want to space those out. You certainly can. Perhaps the first meeting on the CIP can be the 27th, which we're calling the second meeting right now. I hate to delay too far because, a lot of decisions about the budget process are going to flow from what capital items are left in by the council, from what you hear in those work sessions. And, they factor into what you see in the fall. So it's your call if you want to change another night. But I respect the concern being raised. I want you to know that it's not intentional that we put you in a situation where we're suddenly talking about things in what might not seem like the right order. But there's been a lot going on this spring, and it's kind of affected some of the timing of a couple of these things.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Do we have our audit back? Or if not, have we been given a drop dead date on this? Because I'm not sure that budget talks really even mean much until we see the audit.
The audit is still in draft mode. I have preliminary financial statements. There is the component of management discussion and analysis that still needs to be completed by staff. Meanwhile, the audited financials portion is going through 2 reviews at the audit firm before they will release and give us a final draft of that report.
Is that all, Mike? Alderman Spiros?
Then I also wanted to know, when will we have the estimate for the wage increases? I'm just trying to get the timing down so we...
I appreciate that.
Right. We just got the plan that Milena presented on Friday. We have a model that we are working to build. I would anticipate having some of those numbers for the June 11th budget meeting.
Thank you.
And to add to that, Milena didn't go deeply into implementation because that's something that's really going to come down to us working with you. But we are, as Jennifer said, we are working on a model, looking at a couple alternatives in terms of an implementation schedule that is, going to be the most acceptable and viable to bring forward for consideration.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. This is a question for maybe Steve or Jennifer, not sure. When we first started talking about these budget meetings, and Mr. Reigel, correct me if I'm wrong, it was so long ago. I'm trying to decide what's the goal of these meetings that we're going to have? What's the information that we're digesting in the meetings, and how many were we thinking of? Was it just one or was it multiple?
Can I start? And then I think I'll let Mr. Reigel speak, because he did bring this up, and it was a great idea when he did, as I recall. And, we had hoped to hold it earlier than this, but my understanding was we wanted to get a good sense of what is the playing field as we start the 2025 budget planning process. Usually we start, you don't see it until October, and we can't do that this year. We got way too many challenges that we're facing. So lay out the playing field. I had hoped that the audit was ready. I'm glad to hear there's preliminary statements that are ready, but the final audit's not complete. Where do we stand in terms of our finances, our debt, our reserve balance, all these kind of things, as we put together what things are going to look like and what we're going to need to likely deal with in broad brush for the 2025 budget. We know that we've lost money from the utilities pilot. We know that we've lost money from the clinic settlement that we won't be getting for 2025. I don't think we're going to make any great decisions that night. We just want everybody to understand and maybe give us some preliminary thoughts and direction as to what we want to look at to begin mitigating that, beginning planning for how that's going to, be addressable by staff as we work on the budget in June and July and August, and as you get updates from us. I don't ever remember talking about more than one meeting. If there's a desire for more than one meeting in the summer, so be it. That'd be perhaps very helpful.
Okay, so
We're going
If
to
I
talk
can just
about.
jump in there.
Oh, yes,
so
please.
The point was, because we could, back of the napkin math, we could figure out that we're going to be short about 600K. We didn't need to get down to pennies and dollars or anything like that, but we just knew that based on like what Steve said, based on the settlement, based on the payments from the utilities and the school, how the mathed out, we're going to be short a significant amount of money, roughly 600,000. So how are we going to make up for that? Well, the hope was to address it in the first quarter. We're sitting here in the third quarter, not really addressing it, but the hope was to address it. So if there was anything to mitigate costs or increase revenue, whatever it may be, we had enough time to put it into effect where, I don't know if we're there yet or not, but that was the goal of the meeting, to try to say, okay, look, this is where the ship's going. This is what we need to do to steer it this way or that way. Whether we need more than one, it's to be determined, because I don't know what ideas staff has. I've thrown some out there. Don't know if they came to fruition or not, but let's see what happens with that. And if there needs to be a second one, then so be it. There might be a second one. But right now, we're looking at it going 600,000 just seems a lot to try to pack into a month worth of October meetings.
Okay, so we're kind of broad, and because at the same time, we don't know what our shared revenue will be. We don't know what there's so many. So yeah, we're just doing broad stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these things, there's some good, there's a good factor in the sense of net new construction is strong, which means that'll give us a little bit more flexibility in the levy. And then, like you mentioned, there's a couple things that are not in our favor. But yeah, what are we looking at? I mean, I literally picture this as a football field where what we're doing here is we're putting down the yard markers, the goalposts, and everything, and saying, look, this is what it looks like. Okay, folks, this is what we're going to have to plan on dealing with. These are the challenges. Here are areas where we might be able to have some opportunities to mitigate the challenges. Let's talk about it. How do we want to attack it? And it may seem like June is, farther into the year than we wanted. We talked about having this earlier in the spring, but we're still farther ahead of the game than we've been most years. So I think if we start getting a sense of where the council's at, as we begin to look at these challenges, we can start attacking this. And the budget we work on here at staff level in July and August can begin to take shape based upon the priorities that come out of that meeting on the 11th and perhaps another meeting or two after that, so that when you see in early fall what's going on, you're like, yeah, this is what we need to see. It makes sense. It's fiscally responsible, and it addresses those, the challenges. Like I said, I don't expect to walk out on the 11th and say, great, it's all good. But we know what we have to begin working on and what some of the opportunities are perhaps to attack.
Alderman Stauber?
Thank you. So when I hear the budget discussion, I kind of interpreted that as what we used to call setting the budget parameters, and Mike Fire and Ed Wagner might remember that process, but essentially it's kind of a high level guardrails, I guess, if you want to call it that, for staff to begin working on the budget. And it might be things like, no tax increase. I know we did that for a number of years back in the day, or it could be maybe a greater emphasis on our infrastructure or street repair. That's what I'm interpreting that. So if I'm wrong, let me know. And then the other question I have, maybe for Jennifer, maybe for Steve, but the MD&A, could we get is it possible to get an early copy of that? Not the full audit, just the MD&A, so we have kind of a high level view of where we think we're going, what our situation is?
Are you looking to receive that at the June 11th meeting?
Or prior, yes.
Or prior. I anticipate working on that this week. So I should have it by it's a short week. Let's give myself Monday to at least have a draft of that MD&A.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and on your parameters comment, I know when I came on board in 2011, we did more of that than we did in subsequent years, because what happened with the state's levy limits, I mean, really truthfully, we can probably give you an estimate, Jennifer, with me and others, of what we'll be able to collect in the tax levy, because we're going to be tied. I mean, we literally are going to be at a point where, based upon what we levied last year, plus the anticipated net new construction factor, we're going to know what that tax levy is going to be, and we can probably ultimately back into the tax rate. So some of the parameters are set by state law in a way, but yeah, you're on the right track. What do you want to see, and what are we looking at as far as how to make it happen financially?
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. You just mentioned, Russ just mentioned that there were the way we did it both at county and here back years ago. And one of the things that we're not doing now is what the county has just started doing again. And that is the finance department basically told us, this is what you're going to expect in terms of revenues. They basically had a model. And then the leadership group met, which in this case, I guess would be finance, budget, and personnel, and basically said, okay, based on our estimate of what the what expenses you want to incur, tell us what projects you want to incur in the next year. And this is just 1 year budget. We're not dealing with the whole CIP. They'll take numbers from the CIP and they'll give them back to us as, okay, this is what I want to spend for the year. And this is what we'll borrow. This is what we'll need to levy for. And this is what we'll need to borrow. Here's what we're going to do. I caused quite a stir down there last year. We limited everybody. We felt we were just climbing out of the inflation hole. So what we did is we told them they could hold departmental expenses at 3%. For the small departments or 1-2 person apartments, this would hurt them because they would be all they've got is salaries. So we basically said that salaries would increase across the board in the STIP plan, in the compensation plan. It would be the inflation rate would increase the whole thing by 3.5%. There was a lot of howling and a lot of anger. They felt that coming out of the COVID, they should be allowed to levy more money and spend. The department heads were a little upset about that. As it was, we came in pretty close to on the money when we finally did program everything in and program the funds the way they worked. I think it's helpful to the staff to know what the council is thinking. So I think these meetings might be good if we're putting them out there in the context of we want to be able to tell you what we're going to be able to afford and what we're not going to be able to afford. I'll give you for instance, I'm looking at what our borrowing estimate for this next year is 4.5 million. Is that right? Okay. 4.5 million. We set a goal for ourselves and a limit back years ago, and I don't remember when we actually changed it, that it was only going to be 3.5 million. So that's something we've got to discuss in these meetings and in both meetings, in the CIP and the other one. So we're going to need to work on that. But I think if we do it that way, I think the staff will feel a little more comfortable once they understand that we are where we're coming from and why we chose to do what we did. I think we should carry on with this in that context. Thank you.
Alderman Fire?
Piggyback on this. Sorry, I'll piggyback on this. I think this is a great idea. If we have to have 1, 2, 3 of these meetings before October, it's fine. I think that staff, you got to give staff some credit when the last couple of years, if you want to remember, the first budget meeting, we would get a budget and we'd say, well, this is going to be a short meeting because before the next meeting, we need $600,000. You want to drop a bomb on somebody, drop it that way. And we've done that 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. And I think Mr. Rigel has a great idea. We start this out, maybe we have to have 3 meetings before we get to October. By October, staff and we should know what we're doing. Don't get in the middle of it and say, oh, listen, I know you did a great job, you cut everything, but find me $600,000 more. How about taking the wind out of a sail? So this is the best day we can, let's move along. And let's vote to say when we're going to have our next meeting.
Can I make a suggestion? And the mayor handed me a good note here that helps me out a little bit. Why don't we do this? And it kind of goes maybe to what, Councilmember Spiros is saying, that we have the meeting on the 11th of June, as you've already agreed to at 5 o'clock, the budget meeting before the regular council meeting. And then we wait and maybe have the 2 CIP meetings on back-to-back weeks, like Thursday, June 20th and Thursday, June 27th. That'll be a good look at the capital. So we'll have a foundation about what the budget's going to look like and what we can perhaps afford in the coming year. Then we'll have the capital projects and how we need to maybe pare that down in terms of what we need to make the picture work. And then we come out with have a second budget meeting in early July, maybe the second week in July, where we can start putting this together into a package and say, what do we have? What is it looking like? And where do we take it from there? What can we afford and how can we make it work from there?
We do currently have a motion on the floor, though, for Wednesday, June 12th and Thursday, June 27th, so we would need to amend it if somebody so desires. Mrs. Tompkins is requesting to amend.
It wasn't working. Okay, I'm going to amend this motion that we move our first CIP meeting to Thursday, June 20th, and our second to Thursday, June 27th. Oh, and add another budget meeting in July. Should we?
We don't need to do that.
We don't need to do that right now.
Just an understanding that early July, we'd have a second budget meeting as a follow-up to all the things we're learning.
We have a second, Alderman Weigel. Is that?
That's the second, the amendment.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote on the amendment.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion carries.
The original motion.
Yeah.
What do we do with that? Obviously, it's not going to
still
happen.
as amended.
As amended?
Just go ahead, as amended.
As amended.
Okay, so we go ahead as amended.
The original motion has now been amended.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the comments.
Request to approve the appointment of Randy Gershman, 311 Lay Avenue, to the Fire and Police Commission to fill a vacant position ending in April of 2027, presented by me. We have a motion on the table by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote. Excuse me, Alderman Fire.
I'm going to vote against this nomination. I've made my reasons why 2 or 3 meetings ago. My opinion has not changed, so I will be voting no. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. Item T, suggested items for further agendas. Seeing none. Item U.
Hang on, Mayor. I do have one. I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand there. During public comment, we had, I'm actually working on candlelight here.
But he's still here.
I'm too cheap to turn on the hall lights here. I'm in a town hall up north, but the parking comments made by I wrote his name down, but Mr. Tom Jensen, I think, of 610 East 10th Street. He brings up a good point, and if you're an owner or worker, at a place of employment where you may be competing against public parking, maybe color-coded cards with a date expiration laying on the dash of an employee or an owner might not be a bad idea. So I'm not sure if that's an item for a future council agenda consideration, or maybe that should go to the ordinance department for evaluation. But I do think it's worth taking a closer look at.
It does. I think the best place for that might be the Board of Public Works, because they have dealt with downtown parking issues in the past, so we can pull some information together and send it there.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? We'll move on to item U, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statute, chapter 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employer over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Update on collective bargaining negotiations with the city's fire union. We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Wagner. Please vote to go into closed session.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
We are in closed session. We'll take a 10-minute recess.